Hi there, listener, and welcome to episode 85 of Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. My name is Ian Willoughby. This time, my guest is the well-known Czech film journalist and historian Jindřiška Bláhová. She's the editor of a brand new book looking at the history of Karlovy Vary International Film Festival in the Cold War period, and it's called Propletání světů, or in English, Intertwining Worlds. So, what did Karlovy Vary look like in the Cold War era? And why did it alternate for decades with the Moscow Film Festival? I discuss those questions and much more now with Jindřiška Bláhová in this episode of Prague Talk. My first question, Jindřiška, why was the festival set up in 1946?
Combinations of ambitions and politics, simply put, because 46 the cinema became state, it was nationalized, and within that there was an idea, let's have a festival, but it wasn't festival, mind you, like we imagine now. It was only 12 films. It was really a tiny, teeny thing. The idea was basically driven by France has a festival, Venice there is a festival, and in their vision of greatness, which was part of post-war new identity and awakening of the nation, the representative of the Czechoslovak film decided, we can also have a festival. And obviously they had a small festival to showcase the greatness or future greatness of Czechoslovak cinema, because the idea was that Czechoslovak cinema can be at the forefront of global cinema. It was also crucial for basically showcase not only the film, but the project of nationalizing or making the cinema state-owned as a viable, great project for the future, because not everybody was in line, not everybody agreed, there was opposition, but communists particularly were driving force and wanted to show that the project has actually validity and should be part of the culture.
Was it the case that it was initially called the Czechoslovak Film Festival? Was that the title in the beginning?
Yes, it was. It was Czechoslovak Film Festival with international participation. And the notion was, we will bring in some films, like from Britain or France or Sweden, and we can compare. So it's about contrast and compare, and we can compare how are we doing, how they are doing, and what can we learn from them, and they can learn from us. That was the idea.
The first edition was in Mariánska Lázně, then it was in Mariánska Lázně and Karlovy Vary, then eventually only in Karlovy Vary. Why that geographical location? Why West Bohemia?
There was a discussion if to have it in Zlín or Gottwaldov or if to have it elsewhere. And there was an idea, closer to German borders, we basically can infiltrate Sudetenland culturally. And let's basically showcase to the world, signal to the world that this is Czech land, this is us. We are Czech here, you are coming to Karlsbad, it's not Karlsbad, it's Karlovy Vary. And because historically it was very pro-German and German. And also Karlovy Vary as a spa basically followed the trajectory of other tourist resorts like Cannes, like Venice. And there was this historical cosmopolitan vibe that was obviously kind of tarnished, but still was there. They can say Goethe was coming here and Freud was here and Schiller was coming here. So there is this cosmopolitan culture, and we will embed it again in this cosmopolitan culture and create a cosmopolitan event, which they did not, but they thought they could.
Even today, we hear many references to the fact that Karlovy Vary is a so-called A-category festival, like Cannes and Venice and Toronto and so on. How did it attain that status in the first place?
A category is a sort of fetish in a way, so it's kind of cool to look behind the A, because what does it really actually mean? And the period we are talking about in the 40s and 50s, it was festival policy and festival strategy, because the International Federation of Producers is the one who actually was granting festivals with, categories and dividing them in accordance to hierarchy and importance. How many stars you can attract or how many premieres you can show was depending on this letter. And also where you were in the calendar. So Karlovy Vary wasn't in there, but was hugely interested because, again, Cannes had it. To have it was a matter of prestige. So already in the 46, 47, 49, there was huge interest trying to get it. But French producers were not really into it because communism, Stalinism, they were kind of worried that, we're gonna tarnish ourselves. But eventually it happened, and it happened in 56 with a long period of sort of courting and, all these things behind the scenes. But the main push was, surprisingly, from French producers themselves, who basically said, we are so interested in the Czechoslovak market, we want to distribute films here. We're going to help you as organizers to actually get the prestigious category so we can get through the festival and through you to the market.
Karlovy Vary was founded in 1946, but last year, or rather this year's edition, was only, quotation marks, the 57th edition. That's because for around 3 decades, Karlovy Vary alternated year by year with Moscow and shared this A category status. Why was that the case?
It's again another big mythical story about how Karlovy Vary was forced to basically alternate with Moscow. It was since 1959. Until then, the Soviets didn't have their own festival, so they were quite happy to actually exploit, in a way, Karlovy Vary, because they had occasionally skirmishes with Cannes or Venice, feeling that they were discriminated against and on ideological grounds, and so they basically banned all Eastern states or people's democracies to go to those festivals and didn't send any films there in a certain period of time. And Karlovy Vary served in the 50s as a basically showcase or a platform for Soviet cinema. And then they figured, as the Cold War became less cold and a little bit more hotter and open, and cultural exchange started to be part of the Soviet policy, cultural exchange with the West, the Soviets decided, okay, we also want to have our own international festival, and said, we're going to run it from 59. And Czechoslovaks, for a long time, they were saying, okay, it was mutually beneficial agreement because we could share costs and it's very expensive to run the festival. But if you look into documents in archives, you can basically see the frustration and unhappiness of the organizers of Karlovy Vary, who felt they had a chance to emancipate Karlovy Vary and really create something good in the 50s. And it was just stifled. And then alternation affected it negatively. That's obvious.
The main prize at Karlovy Vary was and still is the Crystal Globe for Best Film. That was won many times by Soviet films. Was the competition at Karlovy Vary biased in those decades? And if it was it therefore diminished in value?
Yes and no. As one of the chapters is, I think, showing quite elegantly, is that chapters in the book is that, yes, the Soviet films were winning, and at some point there was a feeling that they basically gonna win whatever is gonna happen. They already have it pre-booked. But it was only in a period of time during Stalinism in the 50s, when basically the festival was running as almost like manifestation of socialist culture and promoting Soviet cinema as this kind of progressive avant-garde cinema. So yes, it was like that in the height of the ideological struggle of global communism or socialism, but it changed. Festival is not a monolithic entity through the years. And in the 60s, you see change also on the Soviet sides, because all of a sudden they producing really artistically valuable films. The Cranes Are Flying are awarded at Cannes. There is a thaw happening. Loads of great artistic energy is flowing from Russia or from the Soviet Union. And also the films are increasing in quality. So you would see really great films coming to Karlovy Vary and being rightfully awarded. Not for ideological reason, but for artistic reason in the 60s. And then it changed again in the 70s when normalization started. So you have the periods.
And say during the Czechoslovak New Wave, did the great Czechoslovak directors want to take their films to Karlovy Vary, or did they have their sights on bigger and better international festivals?
They were very ambitious, all the Czechoslovak film directors, and they were also supported by the Czechoslovak film monopoly, who wanted to be seen abroad, who wanted to send Czechoslovak films and Czechoslovak New Wave films abroad. So like Mannheim or Cannes or Berlin, they were showing Czechoslovak films, and obviously you could get prize money at those festivals. You can't get them in Karlovy Vary. And for Věra Chytilová or Miloš Forman or Jiří Menzel, it was much more prestigious to show their movies in the West. So they tried to do that. And inevitably, Karlovy Vary was neglected. And the organizers, you can see the schism. They were frustrated because they, on one hand, wanted to be seen abroad, wanted to send the crème de la crème of the production abroad, but at the same time also wanted to show some Czechoslovak films in Karlovy Vary. And it wasn't happening. Filmmakers were not really interested that much. And what happened is in 1968, when Cannes was cancelled, the Capricious Summer, Rozmarné léto by Jiří Menzel, was shown, taken out of competition and shown in Karlovy Vary and won. But it was, hesitatingly accepted by Jiří Menzel. He was not very happy about it. He came, but was kind of sour about it. But again, it's a sort of generational, it was portrayed as a generational thing, but it was not like a huge antagonism. It was just a group of young, ambitious filmmakers who were supported by the film monopoly to go to the West, and they took the chance.
I learned a lot from the book. It's very interesting, but I must say my eyes were immediately drawn to the photos, especially of some of the big stars like Henry Fonda, Tony Curtis, and so on. Those stars were, I presume, used to a certain level of luxury. What did they find when they came to Karlovy Vary and went to the Grand Hotel, not pub in those days, but Moscow?
If they were lucky, they found bathroom, because bathroom was for a very long time a sort of scarcity, but it improved over the years. They were lavish with variety of presents, so they would be getting like Czech glass or Czech chocolate or some silk scarves and cigarettes, etc. So they would be definitely sort of lavished with that a little bit to make their stay nicer, because they were not very lot of them. There was a few stars, like of big caliber stars. In 1964 you would have Claudia Cardinale, and there would be big hoopla about her, and she was coming. And you didn't have like a lineup of A stars, so they were really taking care of them and were trying to basically compensate for maybe some sort of lack of Western modernity, which Czechoslovakia was lacking behind, with more cordial, almost like welcoming atmosphere, and organizing their days and offering them trips and shopping trips to Prague or other places, going to castles and hunting and, having, I don't know if you have a term for it, but roasting wursts or roasting
sausages on the fire.
And sausages on the fire and things like that.
That's the famous picture of Tony Curtis.
This famous picture of Tony Curtis, who looks absolutely confused what's going on with his sausage on the steak. But there was definitely an effort to elevate the festival in the 60s, to make it more cosmopolitan and make it more sort of chic.
And how much were Western film distributors interested in bringing their films to Karlovy Vary?
They were definitely post 56, post like late 50s, 60s, when again the East and West started to communicate much more, and Czechoslovakia also was interested in various levels of exchanges, both economical and cultural, across Iron Curtain, which was not as irony as one tends to think. It was really seeping through this kind of exchange, particularly at the festival. So Hollywood was extremely interested, for instance, basically since 56, trying to use Karlovy Vary as a foothold to again sneak through back door to the market and then to Russian market.
One thing that struck me was that Karlovy Vary Film Festival, even if it was limited in some ways or even many ways, it must have been a huge deal to Czechoslovak cinephiles who were stuck behind the Iron Curtain, didn't have that much access. It must have meant a lot to them even to have it just every 2 years.
It was and it wasn't. The festival was closed to general public, basically. It was a model for Cannes until certain time, until mid-70s. It was industry, within the industry, oriented towards the industry, inside of the industry.
So no backpackers in those days?
There were no backpackers, but definitely there was a open theatre, the summer open theatre, which is a fantastic place with 3,000 seats, and that was aimed at just normal general public and also the guests of Karlovy Vary and the population of Karlovy Vary. And it was hugely popular. So that set aside, they were definitely films including Hollywood blockbusters. There was Alien being shown there. It was like movies that you couldn't expect, but they were there being shown, or musicals.
My final question is, what happened when the Cold War ended? In 1990, Václav Havel was there, also Miloš Forman, but was the festival a little bit kind of shaken or confused to find itself suddenly in a democratic world?
It was again, and after any change, there was two competing energies. First was one, okay, there is this possibility, a new energy to do a different festival, to invite people we couldn't invite, connect to the West much more, shed the political aspect entirely, as you mentioned, invite figures that are associated with democratic new vision of the country, Václav Havel and all his entourage, and Miloš Forman and his famous cycling route from Theodor Pišťák to Karlovy Vary. and new sections representing American indies, etc. So there was this new energy, and on the other hand, there was a sense of abandonment. The festival was sort of abandoned during 92, 94, or particularly 90 and 92. It was a little bit abandoned by the state because nobody knew what to do with it. If the state should run it, or Ministry of Culture, it should be somehow privatized. Nobody knew what it meant. So it was this process of something went right, something went wrong. The artistic directors were changing annually, so it was very unstable, fighting with also Golden Golem, the Prague Festival. But eventually it was bought and transformed and started its journey to festival we see now, for better or worse, in 94.
Many thanks indeed to Jindřiška Bláhová for that fascinating interview on the Karlovy Vary International Film Festival in the Cold War period. Neatly, I myself know Jindřiška from the current Karlovy Vary Festival, which obviously is a lot different from how it was pre-1989. Anyway, this has been episode 85 of Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. So if you're new to us, there are many, many more editions out there for your listening pleasure. Check some out, and why not subscribe while you're at it. That's all for now from me, Ian Willoughby. Thank you so much indeed for listening to Prague Talk, and talk to you again very soon.